in gate 3, but slowly but surely getting there. As we've got a green light and we're underway. And from the middle of the line, Sweet Miller Jean showed pace, so too Sweeter Than Sugar going with it. But getting across will be Sweet Miller Jean from Sweeter Than Sugar. She's a pleasure. The trotter caught out wide there, pushing forward. Just behind him then was Madame Mario. Then came Dabby Minga. Further back then to Aldebaran Crescent, who's 4 back on the markers on the early stages. Then came Marley Joe, and at the tail of the field there is Samira Maid. So they swing down the back straight, and pushing on the trotter, She's a Pleasure will take up the lead role here. From in second spot, Sweet Miller Jean. Then came further back, left out and punching the breeze was Darby Minga. Now 3 back on the markers is Sweeter Than Sugar. Landing 1 out, 1 back was Brett Bunfield's drive, and that's Marley Joe. Further back then to Madame Mario, who's now buried 4 back the markers. And just behind it was Aldebaran Crescent. And just sliding around it was Samiramide. So up onto the top turn. And traditionally we usually run in single file, but they've trialled like a race trial here, a race meeting, but down the straight they come. And to get the battle this time, pretty much racing in pairs. And in front it's She's a Pleasure. Had to do a little bit of work to get there, the trotter, but has a bit of ability, so she'll keep rolling along. She leads by 2 or 3 metres from Darby Minga, who's been punching the breeze throughout. Behind the leader is Sweet Miller Jean. On its back was Sweeter Than Sugar. 1 out, 1 back poised to go is Marley Joe. Then came Madame Mario, who's buried back on the markers there, 4 back on the pegs. Up on its outside was Samiramide, and at the tail of the field is the other trotter, and that's Aldebaran Crescent. But he's about to put in the big strides as they swing down the back straight. And head down the back, heading towards the top turn. And they've got to catch the leader, She's a Pleasure. Still travels nicely in front for David Aiken. Up on the outside, Darby Minga's done all the hard work, but still keeps on going and keeps getting closer. Sweating on the run behind the leader is Sweet Miller Jean. It's travelling okay and awaits the passing lane. So they swing into the straight. And the trotter will corner in front, She's a Pleasure. Darby Minga's been a good effort, win, lose or draw. Now going to the inside is Sweet Miller Jean, is putting in the big strides. Sweet Miller Jean up on the inside for Lee Sutton. She's a Pleasure going with it. Sweet Miller Jean just pokes its head in front and gets up to win by a neck from She's a Pleasure. Then came Darby Minga. Further back to Marley Joe, who was in 4th spot. Then came Sweeter Than Sugar. Just behind them was Aldebaran Crescent, Madame Mario, and Samiramide